Hello team, and Alistair, I believe. Welcome to another ATP geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a Ukraine war update extra video, giving you extra tidbits and nuggets to get your teeth into to give you a greater understanding of the war in Ukraine. So before I get to me old mucker Thomas C. Theiner, I love a good thread teaching me about all these horrible weapons. Actually, really, like you wouldn't believe. I'm not a big fan of weapons in outside of defensively requiring to use them because an aggressor has attacked you. But anyway, let's put that aside. I'm just gonna, just on a personal level, for some of you will know because I've said it before. Some of you actually won't. New people who have joined the channel and are following my videos. I've got primary progressive multiple sclerosis. This is an autoimmune condition where my body attacks initially the coverings on the nerve, like the myelin sheath, which is like, if you think of a wire, think of the protective plastic around the wire to protect the wire. Well, I've around our nerves, our central nervous system, we have a protective sheath around that, and my body attacks that, so that the nerves end up not being able to send signals around the body, which means the body stops being able to receive those signals from the brain, such as like you start with your legs and you stop being able to use your legs, and then your body just kind of shuts down, and eventually, you know, you're being fed through a tube or whatever. So the idea is, right, how do you stop getting to that point? And you get a type of MS called relapsing remitting, where you get worse, get better, get worse, get better, and you take drugs to stop that happening so frequently to extend the period between your relapses. But eventually, everyone with that kind of MS gets to a secondary point, which is called secondary progressive, where you just get worse, right? I started with that primary progressive, so my version just gets worse, right? So and this is all linked to, by the way, this is all linked to Russia. So I was diagnosed with that in 2018, and there was nothing on the NHS in the UK for my type of MS at the time. There is one drug now, but I did a load of research because I'm a geek. Researched it up, found out there's something called HSCT, which is stem cell therapy. Basically, your stem cells are taken out of your blood. You control or delete your immune system, so you kill your immune system with hardcore chemotherapy, and then once your immune system is dead, you reboot it with your stem cells, and then that reboots your immune system, and you start again, type thing. And if it works, it keeps your MS from not progressing at stasis from where you kind of first had your treatment. So if you're already in a wheelchair, you're not going to be suddenly getting up and walking again. You'll just remain in a wheelchair. You just won't get worse. Some people do get a little bit better if they're a bit lucky. I got a bit better for a year, and then I'm back to where I was. So anyway, I had that done in Russia, in Moscow, in a clinic in Moscow that was like the best I could find in the world. Oh, it's like the main one. They've been doing it for 20 years there. You can now get it done down the road in Southampton, in the UK, and a few places in the UK, but I don't think I would have qualified to have had it done here. So I raised a bunch of money, £40,000 I had to raise. Got out there in March and April in 2019. So this is almost my 4-year stem cell birthday, where I had a new immune system. And I'm still able, I do have bad days. Some days my brain just doesn't work very well. I struggle to find words. There's a lot of umming and ahhing because I just can't find a word. So that explains that. But I have a lot to thank. I would say Russia. It's not Russia. I have a lot to thank a clinic in Moscow and Dr. Fedorenko and his amazing team for just incredible. I mean, the clinic there was just superb. The hospital was absolutely amazing. The team was just phenomenal. And indeed, there's a whole channel where, if you go onto my channel's part of my own ATP geopolitics section, I've got a whole channel where I did a whole load of videos documenting my entire experience of having that, and you can see me without any hair, and getting my treatments, and so on and so forth, and having the whole experience there documented. So if you're interested in that, or if you know anyone that's got MS that is thinking about getting the very best treatment they can get, point them towards this, and then my recovery from it afterwards, and so on and so forth. So there you go. That's my experience of having multiple sclerosis, and my experience of going to Russia and being in Moscow for a month. Would I be able to do that now? Almost certainly not. I'm sure that it was so sad when this war started. Because I've supported people and given people advice on HSCT, and there would have been a bunch of people who had booked, who'd done fundraising, and then suddenly they would have been unable to go to Moscow and get that treatment. So anyway, that's just a bit of my personal life. You probably skipped through that, and you get into Thomas E. Tyner because it's far more interesting, right? Thomas E. Tyner. Here comes a thread about anti-tank guided missile ATGM guidance systems. Thursday, I did a thread on ATGM. I've shared that one with you. Warheads, and a thread about non-guided anti-tank rockets like the 84 and Panzerfaust 3. So now it's time to do the big ones. Let's begin with the semi-automatic command to line of sight. Goodness, SACLOS missiles, which we have to divide into two groups: TOW 2A, Milan, Eryx, Conkers, Metis M, Metis, and the Faggot. Overfly top attack, the TOW 2B, Bill 2. Okay, so let's do that. So here are these different sizable munitions being sent out of big fat tubes at some kind of enemy installation or tank. Simplified explanation of semi-automatic command or to line of sight. Semi, the gunner has to aim at the target and keep it in his line of sight from launch to impact. So the opposite of this is fire and forget. So you fire it, right, quick, pack up, I'm off ski. Right, this is fire it, and I'm keeping on looking at it. Yep, brilliant, it's hit. Right, then we can go. Automatic command is the launch unit tracks the missile and automatically sends steering commands to the missile to align it with the gunner's line of sight to the target. So there's communication between the missile, you as a gunner, and the machinery you've got with you. The missile is tracked via an infrared beacon at the rear of the missile. In older missiles, this was a simple flare activated at missile launch. As flares can be easily jammed by an enemy infrared source, modern missiles use infrared or electronic flash lamps, which blink at coded frequencies randomly chosen by the launch unit. TOWs, like this one used in Syria, use a xenon beacon as a shortwave infrared tracking source and a high-intensity thermal beacon as long-wave tracking source. So let's have just a little look at this one being used. Let's go back to the beginning.
الله أكبر. استهداف دبابة لقوات النظام صاروخ تاو مضاد دروع. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. تدمير دبابة.
Because, of course, it was God that directed that to the target and not science. But anyway, I won't go into that. The steering commands are sent from the launch unit to the missile via a wire, either a thin copper or steel wire, which unravels from the missile during flight. And in fact, you can't see these most of the time. A short clip of a French Milan training ground where you can see dozens of wires in the grass. So let's have a little look at that in large. So here you can see all the wires that have been left behind, and one there that's trailing from one that's just been shot. So the wire connects the missile to the launcher. TOW missiles use two 3,750 meter long steel cables. The new RF variant uses a one-way radio link. Wires can't be jammed, but they can be entangled by trees or other obstacles. SACLOS is a proven design, but with a few drawbacks. In smaller missile designs, the wires, and you can see that there, limits. Let's just get that bigger for you so you can see the wires. They can become tangled, but the wires limit range. And for the duration of the flight, the operator has to remain exposed to aim at the target, like this Ukrainian Milan operator. So what you have here is somebody that shoots this off, but of course, while that's in the air, this guy, you might see a flash in the distance, and you might have some time while this guy has to sit there, and indeed after it hits, where other people can see where it's come from, and then hit this guy. So there is a risk involved. Fire and forget would be better because you fire it and you just run away. So to guarantee a stable line of sight, most SACLOS missiles come with a heavy tripod, which is why, for example, the US Army today uses TOW missiles on a Humvee, Strikers, and Bradleys. If you look closely at these TOW missiles, you will see they have different cone shapes: direct attack TOW 2A and overfly top attack TOW 2B missiles. The TOW 2A have an extendable probe with a precursor warhead to defeat explosive reactive armor before the main heat warhead is detonated. So that sounds like a tandem warhead. So it explodes the reactive armor first, and then it gets that protection out of the way, and then hits it with the heat warhead, which was explained in the previous video. So reactive TOW 2B missiles have a sensor unit at the front which uses laser profilometers and a magnetic sensor to recognize when it flies over the target and then detonates the missile's 2 tantalum EFP warheads. If you're not yet read my thread about heat and EFP warheads, below is a link to it. I shared that with you on a previous video. Overfly top attack missiles like TOW, Bill, and Bill 2 have the advantage that an enemy target doesn't need to be fully visible for them to hit it. So imagine you got a tank in a revetment or dug down. You can't really see it. It can fly over the top and kind of, so as long as it can get over it, then, job done. This is specifically useful against an enemy that has built fortifications behind which tanks can hide in hold down position, like this Leclerc. So this is a French tank there, exactly what I was saying. Fire at the visible part of the SACLOS will steer the missile 1 meter above the line of sight until the sensors detect the tank below. Another way to destroy hull down tanks are top attack missiles. So fire and forget, like the Javelin, fire and observe and update, like the Spike, MR, LR, or ER, or the Acheron. The Javelin is the only pure fire and forget anti-tank guided missile. Once the Javelin's command launch unit has acquired a target, the Javelin launches and its gimbal mounted imaging infrared seeker automatically pursues the target. Meanwhile, the Javelin rises to 160 meters, flies towards the target, and once above it, dives onto it and detonates its tandem heat warhead. So pretty useful. The drawback of the Javelin is that the operator needs to have a clear line of sight to the target before launch. But one of the main advantages of the Javelin is that the operator can immediately get up and take cover once the missile is launched. So from that video, you didn't really see the trajectory. We'll hopefully see one in a little bit. Let's have a look at this, actually. This is Javelin. Russian APC destroyed by soldiers of the 56th Brigade from an FGM 148 Javelin. This came out only, I think, yesterday or the day before. This is very recent. So you can see the guy in the distance. You can see how high it goes. And then you don't even see it, how quickly it goes down. These guys, this is one that I showed you actually previously, and I was like, I can't believe these guys are still like getting off that vehicle and whatnot. But it will have rendered that vehicle inoperable. So the Spike and Acheron can be used as fire and forget missile too, but their main advantage is that they can lock on at a target after launch. After launch, both missiles rise in the air and their gimbal-mounted infrared OCD sensors acquire video of the battlefield, which is sent back to the launch unit through an unraveling optical fiber cable. Spike ER missiles have an 8-kilometer cable. It's incredible. Here is a video of an Azerbaijani Spike gunners flying Over Armenian units, picking out the most valuable targets and guiding their missiles onto the target. So let's have a look at that. Goodness me, just shut up. Right, so here we have over the targets. Goodness me, and quite a number of targets to aim for. And there we go. And there we go again. 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 In fact, it happens quite a lot. So, sorry for the music. Really does irritate the bejesus out of me. So that's Azerbaijani spike gunners flying over Armenian units. That Israel forbids European nations to deliver some of their 20,000 spike missiles. There's talk about spike missiles recently. I don't know whether they have actually been used. To Ukraine is disgusting and hampers Ukrainian combat capability. I don't know if they. I might need to look into that because there was news that they were going to be supplied. Now to the only true laser beam riding anti-tank guided missile, the Russian Cornet. Laser beam riding requires a direct line of sight to the target, and the operator has to keep aiming the laser at the target until impact. And it's not really a laser beam, it's more like a laser grid, and a laser receiver at the end of the missile determines the missile's position within that grid. The missile then calculates the required steering commands to move itself to the grid center, which aligns with the operator's line of sight to the target. Supposedly, also, Ukraine's Corsair and Stugna P missiles are laser beam riding, but publicly available info is contradictory, and the missile's design seems to point to both being laser guided Saklos missiles. So I was thinking that does sound like the Stugna. Stugna is being used to great effect by the Ukrainians, and has an awful lot of video footage of it. I've shown you a load before. It's good for doing video footage because you're looking through a screen, and actually someone can just hold their camera up to the screen. Whereas if you fire off a javelin, if you're on your own, you're just running away, or you've got to have someone popping their head up with a mobile phone to look as a missile goes into the distance. It's all really dangerous. You're more likely to get video footage of someone using Stugna where the video operator is actually up to 50 meters away from the person with this tube that fires. So the tube fires out, you have a line going to the video operator who then steers it, kind of helps to guide it to the target, and then you can have someone else just looking at with a mobile phone. So here's one in action. These are Stugnas, sometimes called skiff. You'll have someone operating the machinery, someone operating the screen, and then another person some way away pulling the trigger, if you like. But the guy operating the screen needs to keep it targeted on the objective. So that's it firing. And quite often they target above it, and then as it gets closer, it comes down. There's a reason for that, and as you can see, it's tracking the target. Now I've seen these hit at over 5 kilometers, and when they take them out, they're very happy with that, of course. All Luch design Bureau missiles have a laser receiving and an infrared beacon at the rear, as, for example, the 130mm and 152mm Skiff Stugna P missiles. That's what I was just talking about in this photo, right side, upper and lower missile. This makes it likely that Ukraine's own ATGMs, anti-tank guided missiles, use a laser instead of a wire to send steering commands calculated by the launch unit to the missiles. If this assumption is correct, then neither Corsair nor Stugna P are laser beam riding missiles. If anyone has more info that can be shared without damaging operational security, please comment below this thread. So he's not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure they do seem to be laser to me, but what do I know? Now to our last guided missiles, the Spike SR and NLAW. Both are shoulder-launched, short-range, fire-and-forget systems. The main difference is the NLAW is an overfly top. The NLAW have been pretty useful. These have been provided by the UK and I think Sweden particularly. It's a cooperation between, I think, is it Saab and UK, but I think it's now taken on by Thales, which is a French manufacturer, but they make them in Northern Ireland. Whatever, you get the point. Endor is an overfly top attack missile which fires a tantalum EFP warhead downward, while the Spike SR is a direct attack missile which uses a tandem heat warhead. Both use optical and magnetic sensors to ignite detonation, with the Endor having a downward-looking laser sensors and the Spike SR having forward-looking infrared sensors. Due to their short range, both systems have limited automatic steering to compensate for the possible movement of the target. Both systems could be described as the Javelin's little fire and forget siblings. So there you go. That explodes above the tank, and the tank has weaker armor on top, and so that's how it does its damage to the tank. That's an N-Law overfly top attack mode. Bosh. There you go. And that causes damage through down into the turret. This concludes my infantry anti-tank weapons threads. If you have not yet read my anti-tank rockets and countermeasures, ERA, NERA, ceramics, etc. thread, then please do so. I've shared that with you previously. So hopefully that gives you some explanation of how these things work. Right. Now, I'm going to go on to talk about this explainer. Someone asked in one of my threads, they're like, well, they didn't ask. They said, I don't think targeting civilian buildings is a war crime. And you look back at what happened in the Second World War, etc., etc., etc. It is a war crime, although, as ever, there's nuance involved here. Generally, will be a war crime. This Reuters article looked into it last year when there was repeated evidence of Russia hitting civilian infrastructure and also civilian residential buildings. So the explainer: when are attacks on civilian infrastructure war crimes? So what does international law say? The Geneva Conventions and additional protocols shaped by international courts say that parties involved in a military conflict must distinguish between civilian objects and military objectives, and that attacks on civilian objects are forbidden. The prohibition is also codified in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, ICC, which earlier this year opened an investigation into possible war crimes in Ukraine. Sidebar, and have just issued an arrest warrant or two. That seems clear cut, but some infrastructure owned and used by civilians can also be a military objectives. Military objectives are defined as, quote, those objects which by their nature, location, purpose, or use make an effective contribution to military action, and whose destruction or capture, quote, offers a definite military advantage. This is where there's going to be some grey area. So hitting energy infrastructure, does that convey a definite military advantage? Are the military going to be using electricity, heating? It all gets a bit of a episode in mental gymnastics. Is energy infrastructure military or civilian? Power infrastructure has long been considered a valid military objective as long as it supports an enemy's army's activities, even if the system also supports a civilian population, writes military law expert Michael Schmidt in the Articles of War blog run by the Lieber Institute for Law and Warfare at the United States Military Academy, West Point. As Russia's strikes on the power infrastructure have intensified, sidebar, they've now just been trading off, it seems increasingly unlikely that its armed forces can name a definite military benefit for each attack. Simply put, Russian forces are almost certainly striking many targets that do not qualify as military objectives, Schmidt argues. When you're hitting energy infrastructure and distribution, targets in Western Ukraine, it's really difficult to argue that those are overtly military targets. Russia says it attacks military targets, including energy infrastructure. How are military needs balanced against civilian? The article continues. Even if some of the targets could be considered military objectives, that is not the end of the story, says Catherine Fortin, Associate Professor of International Law at Utrecht University. The military must consider whether the damage and loss incurred by civilians in such attacks are excessive compared to the concrete and direct military advantage, she said. One example might be that if you knew that one, I'm taking this to the extreme, if you knew that one soldier was in this building, but there are also 600 civilians, it does convey a military advantage by hitting that building because you're taking out the one soldier. But if you're taking out 600 civilians as well, then that's excessive, and that would, pretty much be evaluated to be a war crime. In this instance, she says, the incidental loss of life and injury to civilians can be expected seems very large given that power outages are making it impossible for surgeons to carry on their work, affecting people's access to healthcare and creating conditions in which vulnerable people are dying due to cold or hunger, she told Reuters. How do war crime prosecutors consider the current attacks? So remember, this isn't to do with residential buildings, this is the energy infrastructure. But you can imagine it's even more obviously a problem if they're just outright residential buildings. I'll talk about that in a second. Nigel Povoras, lead prosecutor for a team of international experts assisting Kyiv war crimes investigators, told Reuters that Russian attacks in the past 2 months have, quote, focused on eliminating infrastructure crucial to the means of civilian survival, such as heat, water power, and medical facilities. Both Schmidt and Povoras say the scale and the intensity of the attacks can additionally amount to them being considered as, quote, acts or threats of violence, the primary purpose of which is to spread terror among the civilian population. This is forbidden under international humanitarian law and was confirmed as a war crime by rulings of the UN Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia relating to the siege of Sarajevo. Now, when you talk about apartment blocks, this is going to be even more overt, explicit, and obvious. The only way I think Russia can get around this is by claiming the two things they can do. One is to claim that there were military people being housed in those blocks, such that the army, for example, was using that apartment block as a dormitory for their troops. So you hit that residential blocks because it was actually full of troops. And of course, you demand evidence for that. And is that the case all over the shop in the middle of in the city of Zaporizhia, which is, just a city trying to go about its daily business. The other one is that they were trying to hit the military target, but there's CEP involved. So circle error probable. If a precision munition, a PGM perhaps, precision guided munition, has is intended to hit a military target, but doesn't, and it hits something, I don't know, 150 meters away that's a civilian target. If that missile hits, it might have a CEP of 300 meters, says that 50% of the time you fire that missile, it hits within 300 meters of its target. Then that's its precision. It's being as precise as it's designed to be. What that means is 50% of the time it doesn't hit within 300 meters, can go anywhere, and it's still, hey, we were using precision guided munition. It just didn't go to where we wanted it to. But even that's given 300 meters. Now, you these days you're using like the West, NATO has concentrated a lot more on refining these PGMs, these precision guided munitions, such that they are more and more accurate, so you don't get collateral damage, because of course that's a big loser for hearts and minds. You don't want to be firing off missiles and blowing up residential blocks because it's not very accurate. So they're concentrating so much more on making their munitions accurate to the CEP of 1 meter or 5 meters. Now the problem is when Russia uses things like the S-300 as a ballistic missile. Ballistic means that it kind of goes up really high and then comes back down like that. It's not like a low flying, and it goes onto its target. It can change direction, do those kind of things. This goes up and then comes down really hard and fast. They use them partly because they've got lots of them, but partly because there's no air defense system that Ukrainians use at the moment that can shoot those things down. But the problem in using those S-300s is they're designed to be used as surface-to-air missiles. So you're designed to hit a jet flying very quickly. Hit them with these S-300 missiles. Brilliant. Okay, but they have a secondary mode where you can use them to hit ground targets, but that secondary mode is more inaccurate and imprecise. So you're firing it. The problem is if you're genuinely trying to hit military targets, but you end up hitting apartment blocks, the question is, are you using the right munition for the job? And this is where you get into arguments over war crimes, where people like the Ukrainians and the West will be saying these are the wrong types of munition to be using to hit this precise military target that's maybe 500 meters away. You use an S-300 in ground-to-ground mode, and it's whacked into the side of this building. Air defense can't take it down. There's nothing we can do, and it just hits that building. Now, you might claim it's trying to hit somewhere over there, but that's not good enough. You should be using a different munition to be doing that. And this is where it goes into the realms of being a war crime. Or if you were targeting a residential building, then it's outright a war crime. Or you were targeting that building because there were troops. You claim there are troops stationed in there, whatever. So there's different ways of having the argument as to whether it's a war crime or not. But hopefully that gives some kind of clarity. I've done that in a previous video, but it's worth, with new viewers and whatnot, recovering old ground and just reminding people. Children forget 80% of what they're taught within 24 hours. So that's why teaching is all about repetition. Something like that anyway. So how long have I talked for? No doubt too long. 30 minutes already. Right, let's go on to this. So this is the article that I've been sharing with you, serializing, which is a bit of a criticism by Lieutenant Colonel, I think, Glenn Grant, formerly the British Armed Forces, has been out in Ukraine for 10 years, since 2010. And he's saying, right, Ukraine's doing really well in lots of places, but there's lots of room for improvement, and here's where they need to improve. And some people don't like me sharing this because I think they see it as too much of a criticism, an overt criticism of Ukraine. And it is a criticism of Ukraine, but it's also how to just do really good war, right? So I think you can just, okay, imagine I'm not talking about Ukraine. This is just a lesson in how to do war. And do it better, and do it better than the Russians. But remember, as I said before, when these criticisms are leveled against Ukraine, these will be the same criticisms that can be leveled against Russia and some. So if Ukraine are doing bad at at training or at certain command structures or this or that, you can bet your bottom dollar that Russia are doing worse. So if you find this a little harsh on your sensitivities, then bear that in mind. Okay, to add on what I've already said in previous segments, let's go to the use of civilians. So he talks about this in terms of HR. There's quite a lot of HR talk. It is suggested that a priority now to replace all military that are not doing frontline tasks with civilians joining the ZSU or using territorial Defence Force volunteers with comparable or better skills. This includes human resources, recruitment, intelligence, logistics, planning, IT, financial planning, and many other non-combat staff appointments throughout the country. This policy can free up countless officers and soldiers who can be used for purely combat and training posts. So when you've got a large sprawling army and you're having to do lots of different things with the army, you end up having a lot of soldiers who are trained to do soldiering, doing backroom staff jobs and admin and all this kind of stuff, and actually they're also trained to fire guns and do first aid. Get those guys out there doing first aid and firing guns, and get people into these positions who are just really good at doing admin or strategic planning or whatever. This action needs imagination, better HR processes, and a wider value for money approach to the war. Using civilian skills was done successfully by both the US and the UK in previous wars, even to the point where US industrialist was made a lieutenant general, so he could change the way weapon procurement was managed. Command selection. Okay, selection of commanders is arguably the most important human factor in any war. Real commanders with leadership, intelligence, integrity, physical and moral courage, and luck are rare. Too often the commanders have been selected by nepotism, by education, or by corruption, and not by results and performance. And he goes on to talk about how selecting them on performance is obviously the right thing to do. Arguably, the army commander must be full-time training troops or full-time creating units, but not both. So he talks about how at the moment you've got commanders who are responsible for training, and he talked in a previous section about how units should be, or whatever grouping he was talking about should be responsible for doing their own training, but the commander shouldn't be responsible for sorting out the training and for sorting out the fighting on the front line. Yeah, you will do like a man to double business bound, said Shakespeare. You end up, if you try and do two things, you'll not do either of them particularly well. You need to concentrate on one thing and do that really, really well. So either you're going to be in charge of training or you're going to be in charge of fighting. You know, so you need two people to do those two jobs separately. But he goes on to say, today he appears to do both roles. At some point in this rearrangement, there will be a weakness. We do not see the best performance from this situation. Procurement is the last section I'll talk about today. Perhaps the biggest reason since February 24th is that procurement and delivering industrial assistance to the ZSU only works at a suboptimal level. We need a complete rethink of procurement and industrial support policy. The current system is still mired in Soviet practices and unimaginative thinking. Basically, he's talking about getting business involved, in industrial brains involved in working out procurement, learning from the private sector. It is suggested that procurement for war needs to be completely rethought and a senior business leader put in charge, and new business trained and experienced civil staff engaged. At present, defense weapon. So again, it's like, and it's the same in education. Sometimes you get people who end up being head teachers in schools who were teachers, right? And they're really good teachers. And you think, you're a really good teacher, now we're going to put you as a head teacher. And like, that doesn't mean they're necessarily good at managing other people. They're just really good at teaching a class full of kids in these particular contexts. Doesn't mean they're going to run a school well. So you need the right person for the right job. And here it's like, just because you're really good at shooting and I don't know, doing mechanics on an SPG or something like that, it doesn't mean that you're going to be very good at procuring stuff for the army. So you're a soldier that's been brought in to do this job. You aren't necessarily the best person for the job. So at present, defense weapon procurement is also hamstrung by the monopolistic reliance upon Ukroboronprom to produce things. Ukroboronprom is not designed for wartime. The conglomerate has proven painfully slow to deliver what is needed. Well, interesting that this has been taken on board, and in fact, so a number of these things have been changed, and we're going to talk about drones in a second. Ukroboronprom will be transformed into a Ukrainian defense industry joint stock company. This is exactly what Glenn Grant's talking about. It's been changed into something that's dynamic and reactive and able to do stuff in a way that meets the needs of wartime production. He goes on to say, I hear comments about not having enough money to do things in Ukraine. During the American War of Independence, senior politicians were sent abroad as ambassadors to try to borrow money to fund the war and to make weapons. Ukraine needs to do the same, but money will only come when there are transparent business policies, plans on how it will be used, and investments are protected. This needs much more directed government activity than is currently happening. So drones, goes on to talk about drones. They are a key tool in this war for Ukraine. They should have the same value across all levels of fighting as, for example, rifles. He goes on to talk about how drones are used in loads of different ways, loads of different types of drones, etc., and the importance of getting it right, the right drone for the right job, etc. Drone warfare knowledge and training should also include counter-drone warfare and technical support training in security measures. Currently, the knowledge, skills, and equipment for using drones successfully in battle is still scattered around the army. This is suboptimal. This is another thing that has changed. So apparently with the new counter-offensive, there are battalions, like specialized drone battalions, or I don't know what groupings they are, but that are trained to do drone stuff and I think they're being integrated in the combined arms maneuvers. So I think that, again, this is another criticism, that it looks like the Ukrainians are taking on board and are changing their practices to adapt to what he's saying. Anyway, that concludes number 4 on this. There's just a few more little bits to go through, just one more segment in my next extra video, but hopefully that was of use to you. I just want you to signpost you towards two things that I produced in the last couple of days. So the first one is video I did last night that's on Atypical Philosopher. So if you go to my other channel, Atypical Philosopher, which deals more explicitly with philosophy, it's where I have been when I was suspended for a week here. But I've just done a video that I decided to put there last night, but it could easily have been put here at ATP Geopolitics. It's Russia, religion, and using gods. So Russia, Putin, propagandist, religion, and gods there. So that's the one. Go and check that out. That is, I think you'll get something out of that. It's the same sort of type of videos I do here, but this one just deals explicitly with religion. Now, given my worldview, this isn't actually a criticism of religion. What this is an exhibition or expose of how Putin and how Russia have done and continue to, use religion. It is the utility of religion for them, not anything to do with whether religion is true or not, or any of that kind of stuff. So it appears that it has become a tool for the Russians to use to divide to us and them, and to also get some purchase outside of their own borders as well. So that's an interesting take too. So another thing that I produced is a piece on Only Sky, an article called Putin's Russian Sacrifice at the Chinese Altar. And this is my article concerning the recent visit of Xi Jinping to Moscow, and really what the fallout from that was, or what the ramifications of that meeting was, who really benefited from that meeting. So go and check that out. That's onlysky.media/jpierce/blah blah blah blah. You can go and find it there. Putin's Russian sacrifice at the Chinese altar. See what you think. Thank you so much for listening to me again today. Please like, subscribe, and share. I really appreciate all your support. If you want to support the channel, you can go to let's have a look. I can't even remember. uasupporter.com/ATP. And you put that in, and any stash you buy from there to show your support for Ukraine, I'll get a tiny bit of commission. Or you can just pop down into the description below. There's plenty of stuff down there and ways you can help. Or you can just watch, if you don't have the wherewithal or desire, just watch the videos. Get involved in the conversations. They're really, really fulsome conversations and threads below, and I do appreciate that. Anyway, take care. Speak soon.